Hello, we are back again and on my favorite topic of the effective team projects and student teams, what, how, and why. And we just completed part A and now we're going to go to part B. And we're going to be finishing that definition that we identified for what is a team. So let's go back and look at the learning outcomes that we've set up. You'll be able to recognize, and I'll let you read the words, identify how to use teamwork. You're going to be able to teach your students how to be effective team members. And this is a really important thing that you need to do, is to create and assess these team projects and processes in your own course. Now, as a reminder, over here in the US, we say the word course. And when I say that, I'm referring to your usage of modules over in your own country. Types of group usually used in courses or modules as they are in your university. Study groups, they informally get together to support each other and answer each other's questions. Informal learning groups are what you see whenever you're doing active learning strategies in the middle of your class. You say, get together, spend about the next 10 or 15 minutes to work on this, and then we report out. And then the last one is the formal learning groups, which we have renamed as team. So remember, in your syllabus, if you adhere to the definition of what we said for team and the characteristics, change those words from groups to teams. Now, as a reminder, we're using the team definition from the Wisdom of Teams, that book, and we're divided into 4 components. A small number of people and complementary skills, and we talked about that in part A, and now in part B, we're going to focus on committed to a common purpose, performance goals, and approach. And the 4th part is how to have mutual accountability, and that means assessment, or the grading part. So let's begin. Committed to a common purpose, performance goals, and approach. That really means for you, the instructors, is how to design an appropriate team assignment. And when we think about this, we're creating this assignment, there are these aspects. We're going to think about what type of assignment works, the difficulty of the assignment, what is appropriate, and what are the skills needed for success, for these students to have a successful outcome. So let's begin. Type of assignment. When I'm talking about the type of assignment, I'm thinking that it needs to be relevant. Remember, it needs to be tied specifically to the content and that it is value added, meaning that it enhances and it furthers the learning so they can delve more deeply and apply the skills that they have just learned from you. Otherwise, they're going to default to saying, oh, instead of 30 individual assignments, you are now only going to do 5 or 6 team assignments, which is this cartoon that I brought up. So make sure it's relevant. In the type of assignment that you do, make sure it's developmental. Just like we're going along on the freeway and you can see these mile markers that tells you where you've been and how much further you need to go. What does that mean in terms of your team project? That means if it is a 15 or 16 week project, divide it into milestones. The first milestone is to do this, and we will check in with each other. The second milestone is this. We will check in with each other and see how well you've progressed on there. Don't just meet them at the end of the journey and give them the assignment. We know how we are as individuals, and even more so for our students. If you don't set up these milestones, they'll wait until the deadline, the end, and just hurriedly rush through to get this project done. And also when I mean developmental, it means start low risk, something that everyone can be very successful with, because what the students immediately do was just jump in and try to finish it as quickly as possible. So what do I mean by developmental? One faculty member was very creative. She says, in order to do this research project, you need to look and figure out what is in the research. Go out there and do a lit review. So she sent them all out and say, what is out there? So it's low risk, everybody can participate, and they're essentially finding out what is the background research for this particular project. The next thing you can do is then saying, after you did the review, maybe you can hone in a little bit more about the research question. And the next milestone might be develop the methodology for it. So again, roll it out with milestones and check in with each milestone. Now, over the course of the semester for this team project, it is very important to start very high in the team process and focus on how well are you working? Are you talking? Are you meeting with each other? Are you being good listeners? And when you start up high in the team process, it will be maintained over the course of the semester. On the team product, start low, just like I said, be developmental. Have lots of success, like go out there and just look at the literature and see what it is. And then as it increases, it will increase in productivity, but because they started high on the team process, it will be maintained all the way through, and you won't have that interfering with the success of your team. Next thing, difficulty of the assignment. Think about this. Require interdependence and enough complexity where not one person can do it by themselves. One economics professor says, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I have these homework assignments that they did individually. I'll just roll them over into the teams. So what happens is that each member would say, I'm going to take homework assignment 1, I'm going to take number 2, number 3, and number 4. There was not enough interdependence and enough complexity in that team project. So rolling over an individual assignment to a team project will not work. Appropriate decision making. Sometimes it's good to say, yes, no, let's go with it. Also think about these team projects where they have to say, wait a minute, is there something where we have to say, it depends? Maybe it only works, this strategy works in this situation and not in that one. And so that is great because it requires interdependency among the students to make these decisions. The last one is to help them figure out how much effort and how much time. You can give them hints on that by saying that you should only take about an hour to do this part of the team project. And maybe the team project is worth 100 points, but it's only going to be worth 5 points of that team project. So they will get hints from you about how much work they do. They don't know when to stop, and you can give the cues for that. Let's go to the third part on designing an effective team assignment. Team skills, we've already talked about that in part A. We're talking about technical skills and interpersonal skills. But there are other things that you need to consider when creating an effective team assignment. Require a fair division of labor. Remember, that's involved in the complexity. I did not say equal. It's fair. Now, how do you decide what's a fair division of labor? Only the team members within the teams can decide that. As much as we like to think that everyone can work equally and put in the equal amount of effort, that won't work. So the teams need to decide what is fair. So that's again what I'm saying is that you need to teach the students how to work well together, just like you teach the content. Utilize diverse skills and knowledge. Remember, compose a team assignment that require a diversity of skills, research skills, presentation skills, spreadsheets, writing, and things like that. And what we need to do is make sure, and this is a great saying to keep in the back of your mind, heterogeneity within the teams and homogeneity across the teams. Let's think about this one more time. This is a very good thing to remember and also to reinforce with your teams. Heterogeneity within, that means lots of diversity. Homogeneity across the teams. All the teams will be the same in which they are composed. heterogeneity within the teams, homogeneity across the teams, and there are no super teams. All of the teams will be equally successful if they adhere to what it means to be a good team member. So let's think about this from the student perspective, committed to common goals. And there are typical things that they always argue about, and we're going to talk about some of that. But essentially what it means that you got to have the students be very explicit to talk about what it means about these goals that they're setting. So for instance, some students think an A is good enough, and some says no, B is good enough. And so by being very clear, they're going to norm and decide what is acceptable on there. And I'm going to tell you how they can norm by using this: concrete, observable, measurable behavioral traits in which you define these goals. That means, are you able to see it? Is it real? Is it measurable? Is it a behavior that you can see? Some of these do overlap, but what I'd like to say is that we put this COMB test, C-O-M-B. Let me give you an example. Here are some variables that are very important for teams to be effective, and we're all going to agree: attendance, timeliness, being able to work well together, put out the effort, contribute your own skills and resources and ideas. Now, we all think that we know what this means, but it's not until they start to work together that they go, well, we're coming in with different standards. So I'm going to suggest use the COMB test: concrete, observable, measurable, behavioral. So let's go and do a little application of this. And I'm going to focus on the word timeliness, because we think that we all know what that means, right? No. So here's a scenario. I'm going to invite you to meet me at a restaurant at 6 o'clock. Okay, meet me at this restaurant at 6 o'clock, and I'm going to have 4 guests. Here he is. He's pretty close, so he'll probably be there at 6 o'clock. And I have my more senior friend, and he's going to be there, and then he knows it takes a little bit more time, so he's going to be there at 5:45. I have my other guest who says, okay, I think it's 6:05 is okay. And oh my, here's my last person. She's running in, and she's being there at 6:15, but thinks that's okay. Now, you can see when I'm talking about timeliness, we had 6 o'clock, 6:05, 5:45, and 6:15. Is this acceptable for the team when it is so important to start on time? So what it is that they need to get together and define what timeliness means. Timeliness means not just starting on time. That means how long is the meeting going to be? What time, how much in advance are you going to submit your part of the work? And also, if you're not on time, as you defined, what does that mean? Is there a punishment? So go back again, and the students need to make concrete, observable, measurable behavior for each of these aspects of what it means for an effective team. So, as a first team assignment, this is what you should have them do. Define the critical team variables. Remember using the COMB test? And then what you should do is all sign it. And you know what? When it becomes signing it, that means I agree, and it becomes a contract. And they should turn that into you saying, we have normed, we have agreed that this is what each of these variables mean. And so what you're doing is setting up ahead of time to predict what it means, what these variables will be, so that there will be no questions later. And it's going to be useful later on in the assessment of how well the individual teams and the team as a whole works. Going back to Food Science and Human Nutrition 466, Dawn Bone, she said, when you submit the contract, your team contract, I want to have all of these in to be addressed. And I thought it was really interesting because she even said, Accountability, what are the consequences? Maybe the punishment if you do not adhere to what we agreed to, what you agreed to in the team project. So we're now to the fourth part, which is the mutually accountable. So that means they give you feedback on how well they're doing and that you are going to check on them. It is so important that you check on them because then they know that you really cared on not only how good the project is, but how successful the team processes are. So here are some ways in which you can check on them. Assess both the process and product. And you're going to have a handout with these examples in there. So don't worry about that you're going to have to create these assessment tools. So if we look, here's one that's used in landscape architecture. And she meets with them periodically because they have to create an artifact, a product. So she says, when we meet, I want you to fill out this form, which is regarding the process and also the product. And also, I like this bit of reflection always about what we're doing well, what we need to improve on there. Let's go to another assessment tool. The formative. Formative means to improve. It's not the end. It's giving feedback in which you find out what's going well, what we need to improve. And we're using the self-peer feedback. And here's an example. You notice that the variables are very familiar because they're the same ones that the students used in their team contract. And this one is that they start with assessing, what am I doing? How am I doing? And I will use these terms in there. And then the next one, they assess each member. Now, have them fill this out maybe in the first third of the team project timeline. So you can catch and they will know whether they're doing well or maybe they need to stop and say, we need to recalibrate. And if you bring the teams in and say, I want to see how you're doing, you can bring up the team contract and say, is this a good document? Are you following it? Do you think you need to revisit it and alter again now that you've been working together? So this is a good touch point. It's sort of like making sure they're doing well, because the next one is for real, is to make a judgment and to give points. So when I'm talking about summative, that's making a decision. How well did you do as a team? And how did you as a team member do? And it is part of the team project grade. So let me show you an example. In this one, imagine that the team project is worth 100 points. And therefore, you are going to say the best score for the best project is 90 points because you allocated 10 points to add on top of that. So imagine that the team, this team, hit the top. They got 90 points. But it's worth 100 points. How did they get up from 90 to 100? Well, it is based on what each person did, allotted the points to each other. The individual student who fills it out is not part of the equation. And you're going to get an average. And so maybe team member A got the full maximum 10 points after you averaged all the information. Team member 2 got 8 points. Team number 3 got 9 points. So for team member 1, that person would get 90 plus 10, 100. Team 2 would get 8, so it's 90 plus 8, and 98 is the final grade. And for team member 3, who got 9, 90 plus 9 is 90 points. And we found that this has been very successful because the students want to be able to show that they did contribute well as a good team member. And it still adheres to the principle of a team project where everyone got the same initial team grade, team project grade. Now, let's think some more about this. I'm talking to you, the instructor. What proportion for a team grade should be in the overall course grade? It depends. And so therefore, for instance, if your overall points in there might be 1,000 points, we can use 1,000 points. 20 to 60% can be allocated for the team project, meaning that 20% for maybe your freshmen and sophomores, but as you go up to your juniors and seniors, so your fourth and fifth year of the program, you can assign a higher percentage to the team project, but not in the first and second year. Stay in the lower percentage. Now, we had alluded to this on what proportion of the grade for peer grading. Let's go back to what I said. If it's 100 points for your team project, do not go more than 5 to 15% of the team project. The team project. And what I'm saying here in the example we used 10%, which is 10 points on there. Because if you do too much, then that relies too much on the team grade. Issue of academic integrity. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to address that because students don't know when it's okay to talk to each other or not to talk to each other, or maybe somebody says, I'll take care of it, and because it's one for all and one for all for one and one for all, you're going to have to reassure and reinforce with the students that if it happens, that happens to all the team members. So please reinforce the issue of academic integrity, which means cheating. So does teamwork work? Absolutely, but it works for both the instructor and the student teams. So let's do a quick reminder what you have to do. For the faculty, teach the students about teamwork. Take a session in your class and train them well. It will work not only in your class, but it will work well later on as they go out into the world because they're going to carry these team skills out with them. Second, successful team projects. Encourage accountability throughout the charter or the contract and also through the assessments on there. Another thing is please make sure that you observe and support. If you're face-to-face, have them work together, spend some time, and take a peek at the teams. If they are doing online, put them into breakout rooms and visit each of the breakout rooms to see how they're doing. And also make sure that you look over the assessment tools to bring them in and say, how are you doing? What can we do to make sure you're on the right path to working well? And so, as a reminder, this is what a team is. Small number of people, complementary skills, committed to a common purpose, performance goals, an approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable, and that means assessment and evaluation. So, did we accomplish this? Did you recognize the group versus team characteristics? Are you able to identify how to use teams effectively in your course or modules? Are you able now to teach your students how to be effective team members? And in your handout, there will be sample documents that you can use to teach your students how to be effective team members. And now you're able to create and assess the team projects and processes. So thank you very much. We have now concluded Part B on the effective teams.